It's nearly Halloween, so I want to have some fun creating spooky themed items using clay. For the first project, I want to do a colouring page, and I have just the perfect book to choose something Halloweeny. It's a book by Anchored Art Designs. Look at the cute little pumpkin swatches in the front. But I don't need to do any swatching right now. I need just one image, so I flip through, find my favourite 5, and eventually settle on the one I think will work best. If you like the look of this book, I will link it in my description below. I'm not going to be colouring this page in the book, so I need to carefully remove it. Now it's time to bring in the clay. You see, I want to turn a sheet of air dry clay into a colouring page, and it's a very easy thing to do. Just roll out some clay about 5mm thick. Once I have it the size I need, I bring in a copy of the colouring page that I chose. I went for the moth in the end, as I think it will work really well for this project. I have scanned and printed it on a laser printer, and that part is important. The black lines on the original colouring page are water safe, but the ink from the printer is not. I tried pressing the image straight onto the clay, as I thought there might be enough moisture to transfer the image, and even though a light imprint came out, it wasn't enough. So I use a dampened sponge and moisten the clay, not sopping, just a little damp. Then press the page, image side down, onto the clay, ensuring the whole page makes contact with the clay. And then peel away the paper, and as you can see, you are left with a print. Now you could stop there, cut around it and just colour it when it's dry, but I'm going to colour this in using texture. For some of the image, I just accentuate the lines by creating an indent below the line by dragging a tool along it. For the rest, I use various tools to create different patterns and textures. For some of it, I use ordinary clay tools, but for other parts, I find random objects that have a texture I can take an imprint from. I also cut out the little moons, but I didn't record that bit. Once you have textured it as much as you want, just carefully cut around the image. I also neatened up the edges by using a brush and water and a silicone clay tool. While that one dries, let's start on the next Halloween clay project. I want to recreate this little cat I made last Halloween for a game of spooky trouble I made. It's a playing piece sculpted out of air dry clay. I think it was pretty cute, so I want to make a bigger one. I start with a ball of aluminium foil. Well, it's more of a bean shape. For this project, I'm going to use my Fimo air dry clay. It's a very basic object to sculpt, no great detail. Just press the clay onto the armature and get to shaping. Squeezing, rolling and pressing it until it looks the way you want. I quite like the shape of the last cat, with the belly side of it on a slight angle and a nice big curve for the butt. To make a tail, just roll out a sausage and make sure it's the right size by doing a dry test. Then you need to make some slip. It's like a clay glue. Just mix some of the clay with water until you have a sludgy glue consistency. Score both pieces you want to join with a pointy object and connect the two pieces. You can use a silicone tool or paintbrush to clean up any excess slip. I do end up smoothing the joint at the base of the tail, just so it looks a bit more connected to the cat. I want this to have some nice texture on it, so I took a large rough paintbrush and dragged it over the clay. And that's it for this one. Just gotta let it dry. On to clay idea number 3. For this one, you'll need a glass bottle. This is one I already had lying around, and I think it was actually supposed to be a spice bottle, but it's going to be perfect for a potion bottle. And for my potion bottle, I want to make a snake wrapped around it. This part of the project is easy. Just roll out a nice long sausage of clay and slowly shape a head. Make 2 little indents on either side and pop in 2 balls of clay. And if you remember, as I did not, make nostrils and a mouth. To texture the snake, I use one of my clay tools' handle and roll the textured part all over the snake. Now, here comes the tricky bit. Getting the slippery little bugger to stay in position wrapped around the bottle was infuriating. My big mistake was using PVA glue to try and attach it. I needed to use a glue that would dry faster, like tacky glue or super glue. I fought for ages trying to get it to stay, and wondered what I would do that wouldn't involve me sitting here holding it for the next few hours. In the end, I cocooned it in a nest of paint cloths and containers. It's time to change up our clay for the next 2 projects. I'm going to use some polymer clay instead of air dry, but I will only be using a very cheap clay. It's not great, but as you will see, you can still make it work. This project I'm working on is a quick fun one, a tea-like ghost. Just roll out a flat piece of polymer clay. I use my pasta machine to make it quicker, but using a roller is fine. Then you just need to drape the clay over a domed type object. I used a small paper cup with blue tack to round off the top. Then I cut the clay down into a circle and draped it again. I used a lid off of a marker to punch out 2 eye holes. Then just keep shaping my little ghost until I was somewhat happy. Once I'm happy enough with it, it's time to bake. Side note, don't bake it with an object that is not bakeable underneath. The last sculpt of the day, we're going to turn a chopstick into a wizard wand. I've made these wizard wands before, but I've either used the hot glue method or alfoil and tape. But I'm hoping to get a bit more control over the details by using polymer clay. I've just slathered the chopstick in bacon bond, then wrapped a super long sausage of clay around and around, making the coils fatter and closer together towards the handle. I add in another sausage of clay where the gaps were too spaced out for my liking. Then it's just a matter of smoothing the coil onto the chopstick and texturing it. Now, this clay I'm using, as I said, it's not great, and I think I could have done a far better job with a clay like Sculpting or Fimo. This cheap Kmart Anko brand goes gooey super fast, so I put the wand into my freezer for a few minutes to firm it up, which made it easier to work with. But as soon as it got a little warm, it went gooey again, so then I'd have to return it to the freezer again. But hey, it's good to know that if you're on a tight budget and cheap clay is all you can get your hands on, you can make it work. When I was doing some of the texturing, I used crumpled alfoil to hold onto it, as any slight pressure from my hands was smoothing out the wood grain texture I was trying to achieve. At least with the alfoil, it meant the clay would take on the texture, helping to keep the surface looking rough instead of smooth, which is what I wanted. To finish it off, I use a plastic gem for the handle. Just wrap some more clay around it to hold it in place, texture it, then cut the gem out before baking because that gem is definitely not oven safe. Once all the projects are dry and gessoed, it's time to paint. Except for the moth, I don't gesso the moth. I originally wanted to use the texturing as the colour, so to speak, but at the last moment I changed my mind and decided to add colour using watercolour straight onto the raw clay. Spoiler, I don't end up liking it. The method of using watercolour on the clay that has not been primed or gessoed actually works really well. I just didn't like how I was doing it. I tried a bunch of things, adding pearlescent watercolours to certain areas, drawing the outlines back on with a paint marker, using gold as a dry brush over the whole thing to try and bring it together, but nothing made it work. So I painted over the whole thing with white. Then when that was dry, I forgot to hit record while I used a grey colour that wasn't completely mixed on my palette and went over the whole thing. I used a cloth to wipe away some of the grey, painted on some more and wiped away some more. Once those coats were completely dry, I made up a very dark grey wash and painted it over everything, letting the water puddle into the textured grooves. And then I wiped away the excess. When that was dry, I used a very light grey to dry brush over the whole thing. And of course I superglued its broken antenna back on. And I actually really like how it turned out. I'm so glad that I just went with the texture and the grey rather than all the colour. And I think Anchored Art Design's moth was perfect for colouring in with texture on clay. Next up, we're going to paint the black cat using a matte paint. When that has been completely covered, I bring in a second cat that I made off camera. I wanted a second one so I could do something different with the face. The first one though, I still want to replicate the mini cat I made last year by giving it a dry brushing with matte white paint. I got a little bit carried away with the dry brush, but it's easily remedied by dry brushing on the black paint until I have it the way I want it. Then I do that simple little face, yellow dots for eyes and white whiskers, and that's it. For the second cat, I still want him simple, but just a bit different. I paint on a dark grey tummy patch and tip to the tail, which was too dark, so I lightened it a bit more. I use the same grey for his ears and I start to paint on his face, but I had too much trouble keeping my head out of the frame while drawing it, so I ended up doing it off camera. And here's how he turned out. I like these little cat sculptures. The clay form is very basic and it's easy to do, and you can get as creative as you like with the paint job. For the little ghost, there's not much to do but paint him white, even though he's already white, but he's dirty white. This would be my least favourite project of the bunch. He just didn't turn out that great. It's very boxy looking, and the only thing left for the little box-headed ghost is a fake tea light candle underneath. Time to paint the potion bottle. I paint the snake metallic green using paint by Jacquard. It really is a brilliant metallic. I go over it with a dark wash to bring out the texture a bit more, followed by a dry brushing of the metallic green mixed with gold just to bring some of the shine back that got dull during the wash process. Now it's time to dress up the bottle just a little bit more. I use another one of these plastic gems and glue it into a hole I carved out of the cork lid. Then, using some thread I pulled from a piece of Hessian material, I wrap it around the neck of the bottle using tacky glue to secure it in place as I wrap it around. To finish the bottle off, I tie on some beads in matching green and gold. But what is a potion bottle without a potion? Let's make an easy one by mixing in some gold mica powder with baby oil. The mica will eventually sink to the bottom, but a little shake and the gold swirls around for quite some time. I think this is my favourite project for the day. The last project to paint is the wizard wand, and that brown I started painting with was far too light, so I switched it for a very dark grey, thoroughly covering every crack and crevice. Then I went back over that with a dark brown, but not being as thorough this time and trying not to go into every crack and crevice. The next coat is a little lighter and the paint job is rougher again. I keep applying layers like this until I reach a colour and look I am happy with. The final step is to glue the gem back into place. And it's done! This would be a great addition to any wizard costume, and you could customise your wand any way you want. So why don't we finish this video off by ranking my projects? My least favourite is the box-headed ghost. Next is the simple black cat, followed by the green-eyed cat. The next three projects I actually like them all, but maybe in third place is the moth? Maybe I like the moth better than the wand, but I just have a thing for wizard wands, so we'll put that in second place. But my favourite project by far for the day is the potion bottle. All those little extras just brought it to life. But tell me, which clay project was your favourite? And which one would you actually like to have a go at making? Anyway, that's all I have time for. I hope to see you next time.